to
Item number 3, House Bill 910 by Garrett.
item number 3, House Bill 910 by Chairman Garrett. We have a motion and a second. You are recognized, sir. Oh, it's been brought to my attention that you have an amendment traveling with this bill.
No, not traveling.
I'm sorry, proposed for addition. All right. What's your amendment number?
I have the amendment, Mr. Chairman, 6782.
That's what we're showing. We
Which
have a
makes
motion
the
on
bill.
amendment. We have motion, we have a second. Let's go ahead and add that amendment to the bill. All those in favor of adding the amendment indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. You are properly amended. Would you please explain your amendment, please?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification purposes, that amendment from the Commerce Committee only changes the amount of employees that might come from the Human Rights Commission over to the Attorney General. They increased it by 3. That wasn't the intent of legislation, so we've got it back down to 33. That's the only substantive change in that amendment that you all just placed on. So I just wanted to explain that real quick.
Thank you.
Committee, what this bill does is the Human Rights Commission will be transferred over the authority and purview of our Attorney General, and it'll create a new division of civil rights enforcement that will enforce the claims in the discrimination world as it relates to the Human Rights Commission, what they handled. It'll now be handled under the Attorney General's office. A couple other things that it adds a new type of discrimination in the education world that's currently not part of what we prosecute and hopefully prevent from happening. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you for that explanation. Members, do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the amendment that we received, it's fairly lengthy, like 65-page amendment. You're saying that the only thing it does was remove 2 employees. There's no other change within that?
You're recognized.
Yes, the first draft, the fiscal review assumed there was going to be 3 employees in the Department of Human Services that would handle some reporting requirements. It assumed that that was in addition to the current employees that are under the commission as it exists now. That was not the intent. So we have changed that amendment to reflect the same amount of employees that currently exist in the Human Rights Commission will be transferred over to the Civil Rights Enforcement Division of the AG's office. So there's no increase in employees, which will in turn create a fiscal note.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm assuming this piece of legislation is before us because something was not correct. It wasn't not as much value added, and this is going to increase. Well, I guess it's not increasing efficiency since we're not reducing any employees. What is the reason for doing away with the Human Rights Commission as we know it and putting it under an agency that gives opinions?
You're recognized.
There are 2 things I disagree with in the premise of your question. One is that we're not essentially getting rid of anything. We are transferring the authority of the Human Rights Commission in its entirety to the purview of the Attorney General and creating a new Civil Rights Enforcement Division. So 1, we're not getting rid of anything. We're not getting rid of any type of claim that someone may or may not have that needs to be investigated regarding whatever they've been discriminated against. Secondly, I disagree with your statement that the Attorney General's office only provides opinions. If that's what you think that our Attorney General's office does, you are wholly inaccurate of what our Attorney's General office does, the enforcement for civil matters as it relates to the state of Tennessee. They represent the state of Tennessee. They do many, many things involved in many, many litigation that has received dollars in the pharmaceutical world, et cetera, back here. So they do a whole lot more than just provide opinions, as you state in the premise of your question. So part of the reason why I support this legislation is because if we continue to have these matters before the Human Rights Commission, which they do a fine job of doing, my concern is the claims aren't going away. There's still folks that think they can get away with discriminating against folks for their housing, discriminating folks against their education opportunities, whatever those may be. And I think if someone receives a letter or an action that the Attorney General is investigating their actions, I think that's going to perk up some people. I think that's going to make people hopefully say, what have I done to attract the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, who has the full authority to investigate claims that I might have been involved in, will that be a deterrent? Could that say to folks, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. I'm not going to participate in these types of action where I'm going to discriminate against anybody. Hopefully these claims will be streamlined. They'll be investigated to the full extent of the AG's power to make sure folks don't discriminate against other folks in this state. That's the reason why I believe this legislation is so important.
Last follow-up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can agree to disagree definitely on our first point. Independence matters. Autonomy matters. From your answer, it sounded like the HRC wasn't doing something in terms of getting behind, and their authority wasn't enough, and now we have to give it more authority, that a letter coming from the AG's office is going to give it more authority than it has now. I guess I fundamentally disagree with that premise. And I do think the Human Rights Commission will be reconstituted. That's why we're here under the AG. So I don't think this is a direct transfer. All the rules and everything moves over. I think there's going to be a process and a reconstitution, and that's what, quite frankly, concerns me in this action. Could you cite a few ways, my last question, that the Human Rights Commission is currently constituting, as you said, they're going to do better on the other side, that they failed our citizens in the state over the last few years, 5 years?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This piece of legislation is not about one organization to the other regarding their failures or their successes, right? It's about making the organization, making claims that we have as a state that we're bound to investigate, making that process better, more efficient, and hopefully deter the action of discrimination in this state as it relates to some civil claims that can be prosecuted by the AG's office. So you have someone that's subject now to a Human Rights Commission where they get information from them. They might even know what that is, right? Again, not saying anything wrong with the Human Rights Commission, but if they get something from the Attorney General's office, my belief, my hope is that any action subsequent to that somebody else may say, they may talk to their neighbor, they may talk to their business partner, they may talk to someone and say, my goodness, I just got a letter from the Attorney General's office. From a legal perspective, the most powerful legal perspective, legal person in our state is investigating some type of claim that I've been accused of. I think that's going to get the attention of that person. I think that's going to get attention of others. And my hope that that acts as a deterrent for these type of actions. I don't think we currently have that as it exists to this day.
Representative Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with regard to these 30 existing positions, this amendment expressly allows the Attorney General to do whatever he wants with them and utilize them however he wants. Does that include terminating them or using them specifically for this purpose?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This division will be transferred. These 33 positions will be transferred over to the Attorney General's office. And yes, just like any purview, they can do what they need to do to make sure that they respond, investigate appropriately to the fullest extent they're allowed to any claims of discrimination that any Tennessean has. So I would hope they would look at this at a whole, look to see how can we make it better? How can we make it more efficient? So certainly those will come down to some questions regarding who does a particular job under the Civil Rights Enforcement Division. I would hope that they would have that ability to make sure that they can do the best way forward of investigating and eliminating these discrimination claims.
Representative Clements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, this amendment expressly says the Attorney General has the discretion to determine how and whether to utilize these positions. So I guess it raises a question for me as to whether or not these people and their institutional knowledge and experience with this subject matter are going to be fully utilized by this Attorney General, whose budget we have increased exponentially, whose staff we have increased exponentially, so he can carry out these political lawsuits across the state of Tennessee. My next question is, in Section 11, with regards to protecting against discrimination in education, you expressly exclude discrimination on the basis of disability. Why is that?
You're recognized.
It's already covered in already federal law.
Well, so is race, color, and national origin. Those are protected classes. How come disability isn't expressly included in here, nor is religion?
You're recognized.
Because none of that's changing. No laws like that are changing whatsoever on the books. You can make your political statements all you want for a political crowd that thinks that's what's happening here, but nothing is happening as it relates to what is currently protected. No class, no subject matter, no nothing is changing whatsoever as it relates to someone having a claim based upon if you're a protected class or not, whether or not you can file a lawsuit or relieving any protection you have under the federal law. There's nothing like that that's changing whatsoever. In fact, most, if not all, the substantive law that currently exists that empowers the Tennessee Human Rights Commission is not changing as it's transferred over to the AG. We're just simply adding an additional way that someone could be discriminated against in the education space. We're adding that as a potential claim so they can investigate the repercussions of that discrimination. So there's nothing being eliminated whatsoever.
You cut them off. Representative Clemens, last follow-up, please.
Thank you. So even under the definition of discriminatory practice, we're not including disability. And then we're expressly excluding it from education discrimination as well as religion. I don't understand why we would purposely exclude it from that section, regardless of whether or not it's protected. I mean, we all know it's protected by federal law, but in this provision, we're not including this in the state statute. I just don't understand why we'd exclude disability or religion from discrimination.
You're recognized, sir.
And once again, that's not an exclusion for someone to pursue that. So I'm not really sure your confusion, but that's where we are. There's no excluding a potential cause of action that currently exists today.
But we're authorizing and empowering the Attorney General to file these claims under a new Civil Rights Enforcement Division, which I don't have a problem with the premise of a Civil Rights Enforcement Division. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor, and it should be housed within the Attorney General and Reporter's Office to specifically focus on those claims. But if I'm looking at this and saying, oh, well, you know, what is a discriminatory practice? Well, if somebody discriminates based on disability, the statute doesn't cover that. And so I guess I'm not, this isn't a gotcha question. I'm just asking you, why isn't it included in here expressly?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'll go for my former statements. I get that it's not a gotcha statement, but we're not eliminating any type of cause of action that someone may have for a claim made by the Tennessee Human Rights Commission that's be transferred to the AG. And it's not the AG filing the claims. It's actually the person that would be subject to the discrimination filing the claims. We're not reducing any claim that they can be made as it exists from transferring it where it is now to the Civil Enforcement Division of the AG's office.
You're recognized. And last one, please. We're running short on time here, Chairman.
Well, this is a pretty substantive piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. So we're expressly laying out here that it's a discriminatory practice in violation of this chapter for a person to deny admission to a school or school program or activity on the basis of race, color, or national origin. But we're purposely excluding that. I just don't understand why that would be. You know, again, the Civil Rights Enforcement Division is a worthwhile endeavor. I don't know why we're transferring over and reconstituting or who on the current commission we have an issue with. But I do have a concern with this Attorney General making political decisions rather than legal decisions. And to the extent that threatens the civil rights of the citizens of Tennessee, I think we need to take a very, very careful look at that and close examination to make sure that that's not the case so that we carry out the spirit of what you say this legislation is.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, there's not in the new education discriminations, there's also the claim that Chairman Clemens is referring to. So I would say there's nothing being eliminated whatsoever in the new division for discrimination in the education space. There's nothing being eliminated for any type of disability. Those claims already exist. That's usually a standalone claim. So it's not eliminating a single thing on what can already be investigated by the Human Rights Commission, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you,
Please,
Chairman.
Representative, we are getting short on time, sir.
All right. Thank you. I'm having a hard time understanding why the AG would be a better suited to carry out investigations and subsequent enforcement of these claims. I've been looking at this since I got here in 2007. That's when the attempts to eliminate the Human Rights Commission was, from my understanding, it's first started. At least first started for me. But I'm a couple of things real quick. Why is it that the institutional racism that we find sometimes in government, why is it better suited for the Attorney General to pursue it as opposed to an independent with a great degree of autonomy as opposed to answering to the AG?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I hope that it roots out these claims for discrimination. The Attorney General's office handles the Consumer Protection Division. Any type of products, any type of items that are in our commerce, they have a division solely created to protect the consumer. They have the experience, they have the lawyers, they have the wherewithal, they have the power of the Attorney General's office to enforce how someone might be manipulated in commerce in the market. And I think they are very good at what they do. My hope is that this will create the exact same thing for the Division of Civil Rights Enforcement, that they will be better than what we've had in the past. There's no guarantee, Representative Hardaway, that's the way it's going to be. There's absolutely no guarantee. But my hope, my wish is that if they do, and this Civil Rights Division does what I believe the Attorney General's office can do, that it's going to root out discrimination. It's going to root out all discrimination in Tennessee. I hope. Of course, we're not going to be able to guarantee the elimination of it, but with what they've done for the Consumer Protection Division and how they fight for everyday Tennesseans, that's what they hope I do. That's what I hope they do with this Civil Rights Division.
I appreciate all of the detail. The Title VI, rather. Why was that transferred, or why are those responsibilities for Title VI transferred to HR instead of the AG?
We are required, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are required under Title VI to report to the federal government under Title VI. That reporting mechanism we're giving to the Department of Human Services. They will be able to report back to the federal government under Title VI for that purpose. And that's the division that we're assigning for that responsibility.
So
And Representative Hardaway, would you like to have a final follow-up?
Yes, sir. So the execution, the enforcement aspects are still going to reside with the AG, and I'm going to go ahead and finish up. I don't understand what the genesis was for you to take this on. Is it somehow related to the reverse discrimination?
Representative Garrett, feel free to take that however you can.
I don't know how to respond to your last portion of that. But to answer your first question regarding the reporting requirements, that'll be the only thing handled by the Department of Human Services. Everything else, the enforcement execution that you referred to in your first question, will still be a function of the new Division of Civil Rights Enforcement under the AG's office.
Thank you for that explanation. All right, members, we are short on time here. We're going to go ahead and move this to a vote. Clerk, could you please open the board? Members, all in favor, you know what to do. Everybody voted? Anyone to change a vote? All right. Clerk, please take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 7 ayes and 5 noes.
Thank you, Clerk. You're on your way out to Finance, Ways and Means. Members, we are up to 12 noon here again. Representative Hawk, Chairman Hawk, I feel like I've done this to you more than once. All right. We have a motion on the bill. We have a second. Chairman Hawk, you are recognized on House Bill 964.
Thank you, Chairman and members. This legislation is a housekeeping bill for architects to coordinate with the Department of Education and Safety and the Fire Marshal's Office. It's going to keep our students safe through safety glass measures.
We have a question on the bill. Members, we're ready to vote. Clerk, open the board, please.